Good day, everybody. Steve Welch here for team number one. It's myself, James Monroe, Nicholas Doherty, and Steve Jahar, and we're going to talk about risk normalization. So my scenario is on supply vessels doing DP operations back when I started on supply. Some of the captains were relatively new to DP, but they were used to manually handling vessels. So of course DP is automatic; you're just sitting there by yourself, you're just watching it. And manual handling is you would take the vessel in and drop her by the sticks for however long you're going to be alongside the installation doing cargo or hose work or and anchors, that kind of stuff. Some of these old captains, they did a lot of things wrong. Some examples are you never get the system time to build a model. So normally you'd sit down outside the 500 for about 30 minutes, let the system get a full mathematical model, and then start moving under the crane here, under DP the whole time. Some of these guys would just scream inside the 500, bring it to a hard stop, slap it in DP, call the crane up and say, okay, we're good to go. That's definitely not the way to run the system. They never ever use the ASOG, that's the Activity Specific Operating Guidelines. So that's a set of guidelines, your status DP, whether that's green, blue, yellow, or red, let you know that, okay, you're good to go or you should leave. They ignore the consequence analysis alarms when you say, don't worry about that, she's just working hard, she can handle it. Not realizing the consequence analysis was that, okay, if you lose the side, the vessel will not maintain its position. And the system was telling us that, so we weren't actually in full DP2 status at the time. And they operated the vessels with equipment offline or out of service without telling the installation. And then some of them even went so far as to look down on the other masters to follow the rules. Well, one captain might turn down the work because he said, no, the ship can't do it. And the other fellow pick up on the radio and say, I can go and do that. I'll get that job done. Right? They looked at the rules as guidelines and not really, they didn't apply to them. So the potential risk normalization was that they were too optimistic and that they thought they could always take the vessel in manual mode to full clear to get in trouble. But of course, if your consequence analysis is telling you that she can't maintain it, she's not going to be able to maintain it. It doesn't matter if the computer is dropping or if you are. They passed on their bad habits to the less experienced watchkeepers and guys who've never really been around. They didn't fully understand the company, the charter requirements, or the industry best practice under income. And after some time of better auditing and a few incidents, most of the cowboys had come around to the proper way of doing things. So maintaining barriers, regular auditing from both shore management and vessel senior management to show everybody that, this needs to be done and stay on top of it. Vessel managers, so that's your onboard managers, to lead by example and drive home the reasons to maintain barriers and a strong safety culture. Whenever change is recognized, you ensure that the company's management change procedures fully utilized. And you can look at even potentially changing out crew to ensure that best practices are shared throughout the fleet and that nobody gets too comfortable and avoid this scenario of someone saying, well, that's the way we always do it. Thanks.
Good day, everyone. I'm James Monroe, and my risk normalization scenario began on the Grand Banks off of St. John's, Newfoundland. It was on an older Coast Guard ship. It was 300 feet by 50 feet, and it was twin screw, and we had issues with one of our shafts, and we were getting pulsations in our shaft, which caused issues in the shaft generator, so we ended up shutting down one of our shafts. So our closest port was St. John's, so we had to proceed to St. John's, and weather was passing through, and of course there was another weather system coming up, and it was in October, so we had to pick our time to get into St. John's. So when we explained what was going on to our junior officers, of course, they didn't really see any urgency, any risk, and of course we had to call ashore and let the shore side know that we needed to get into St. John's for repairs and we needed some parts, and they again didn't see any urgency. The only urgency that they had was delaying the operations. So there was a bit of urgency for us to get in and get repairs, but there was no urgency around the risk involved in getting through the Narrows to get alongside to get repairs. So our strong barriers were when we sat down, all the officers, we used the pre-arrival checklist as a brainstorming session to go over the what ifs. And we went over all the what ifs, the grounding, the striking bottom, the loss of all propulsion, and we went through all those scenarios, and we put together the best plan that we knew possible to try and prevent those and mitigate those. So all of our everybody was on deck and prepared and ready to take on any extra duties. So we waited for the weather to pass, and of course we got through the narrows on a single screw and got alongside and effected our repairs. Thank you.
Hey guys, it's Nick. Today I'm going to be talking to you about my example of risk normalization and what you can do to keep your barriers strong when things change. So the example that I have here up on the screen is a ship-to-ship transfer that we did while I was on board, and well, specifically the number of hoses that are used and how that changes frequently with a ship-to-ship. So the risk that's being normalized is whenever you change the number of hoses and the amount of grades that you're going to be loading at a time, there's always the risk that you either get cargo contamination, or you could have a spill, a leak, you could accidentally use a defective hose and stuff like that. And it's things that just get overlooked because of commercial pressure. So in this example here, we had planned to do 2 grades at a time, hence the 2 hoses. And we had adequate manpower at our manifolds. The 2 hoses, we had checked everything, followed the checklists, and everything was lined up properly for the transfer operation. In this example here, as you can see, there's a hose hanging just between our crash rail and their crash rail right here, and that was a change in plan on their part. We were taking the cargo from them, and due to commercial pressure, they had asked us if we could take a second cargo with another hose, even though that wasn't planned. So as the officer in charge of the watch, the first thing that I did was I took a step back and I reassessed the situation. Could we do it? Yes. Should we? There's no reason not to. The next step that I took to keep the barriers strong was I followed the company procedures. I went over the checklists again, checked over the hose, supplied enough manpower. As you can see, we have our guy stood at our manifold. There's a gentleman here at theirs, and another one here. And in addition to that, personally, from my own experiences, I usually, if I have any doubt or any question, I will ask a senior officer or someone who's senior to me. The reason for that is it's an extra barrier, but it provides an outside counsel, a different perspective on the situation. And a lot of times they may be able to point out a risk that perhaps you haven't thought of, or that you just didn't notice the first time. So that was my example of a risk being normalized that happens quite frequently with ship-to-ship transfers, and what I do personally to keep the barriers strong in those situations. So I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions or any comments, feel free. I'd be glad to answer them. Thanks, guys. Take care.